everyone, and welcome to another edition of Speak Out Loud, the story behind a brand. I'm so excited that you are joining me for another show. Tuesdays is my favorite day of the week. Now, I know Friday, everybody loves Friday, but I love Tuesdays. And I love Tuesdays because I get to do this podcast and I get to talk to some of the most incredible people on the planet about their stories behind the brand. And today is not going to be anything different. And today's guest is just someone very special. They have a big, beautiful heart, and they're going to help us get free from some things. So if you have college students, if you have high school students, if you are just out of college, I mean, there's no age limit to what he's going to share with us today. I want you to get them and bring them around, or make sure that you guys are watching the replay from this, because he is going to bless your soul today. As you know, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we're just bringing folks in to kind of keep our finger on and our foot on the gas on this topic. It is something that is not talked about, definitely in the Black and Brown communities, and we need to talk about it more. So sit back, relax, get you a pen. I always tell you, get you a pen and pencil, because I have a pen and pad right here, and I'm always taking notes as our guests pour into us. And so get ready to be set free. Ready? Let's go.
You're watching Speak Out Loud, the story behind the brand.
About that. See how modest she is, y'all? But let's go. So roasted crickets, I'm like, not eating that.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Every day showing up, even when you don't feel like it.
And now your host, Lynette Jackson.
Well. So welcome to another edition of Speak Out Loud, the story behind a brand. I am your host, Lynette Jackson. And for those who don't know me, I will introduce myself to you. I am an author, a speaker, and I own a really cool company called Roar Media Group. And our tagline is Speak Out Loud. And what we do is we help our clients speak out loud in the marketplace with graphics, websites, videos, animation, voiceovers, you name it, we do it. Just strategic planning. We do it because there was a need to provide quality graphics at affordable prices for nonprofits, pastors, churches, and small businesses. And I would love to do it for you. If you feel like you need some help and we can help you out, just log on to our website, roarmediagroup.com, and schedule a free consultation. Before we get started, I have to play a video because this is a sponsor of Speak Out Loud, the story behind the brand, telehelp 24/7.
Hi, my name is Lisa. And because of what was going on inside of my head, I lost my smile a long time ago. Millions of individuals are affected by mental illness each year, yet it's not always easy to talk about. Many people don't know where to begin when seeking help for mental health issues, which is why I logged on to telehelp247.org and began speaking with a therapist who assisted me in settling the things in my head and restoring my smile. Log on to telehelp247.org and get your smile back. Telehelp 24/7. Culturally competent mental health care, meeting you where you are.
Well, that's right. So this show is being sponsored by telehealth 24/7. And we are so excited to be partnering with them, culturally competent mental health care, meeting you where you are. We would love, love, love for you to log on to that website, check them out. And if you need to talk with someone, most definitely go talk with someone. All right, let's get started with our show. Today's show, I heard this gentleman speak at this group that I hang out with, this crazy, crazy group I hang out with every morning at 7 a.m. on Clubhouse. And when I heard this gentleman speak, boy, oh boy, I was just so moved with compassion and moved. And I just was like, wow, where was he when I was going to school? And I'm quite sure many other people were saying the same thing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest to you. His name is Mr. Abraham Sculley. Hello, Abraham. How are you?
Fantastic. What an amazing introduction. I'm excited to
Well,
be here.
I'm glad that you are here. I am glad that you are here. So, you know this, you know how to do this because we have to do this on Clubhouse all the time. But I always start off asking my guests the four clarity questions, which is who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? And Abraham, who do you have the privilege to do this for?
Yeah. So my name is Abraham Sculley. I am the CEO and founder of Speaks to Inspire, the mental health solution for young adults suffering in silence. And why I do this is because I was once a college student who dealt with depression, had no idea it was depression, and suffered in silence for a very long time. And so I get to work with young adults, youth all across the country, and higher ed institutions and bring programs to promote mental health awareness on campuses.
That is so exciting. My client and Telehelp 24/7, the CEO started that company because his daughter suffered with anxiety and she went to Hampton and they were looking at schools, there was no school out there that had an adequate mental health counseling center that could help her. And so he decided, I'm going to start this company. And the company went from there to first responders to EAP to church.
Mm.
So you talked about you didn't understand um, that you were going through depression. Talk a little bit about
Yeah, so I grew up in a Jamaican household. So not with just one Jamaican parent, but I had two
that.
straight from Jamaica. And so they actually moved to the US. We lived in Miami, Florida, in pursuit of the American dream, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so it was, more opportunities in the US, greater relationships, ways to build businesses and different things like that. So my parents moved here, and Miami is where I was born and raised. And growing up in that household, we were also a Christian family. And
Hmm.
so just to give you a little bit of that dynamic, I saw a lot of hard work growing up, and I saw us get through and go through different situations, no matter what
Hmm.
the issue was,
Hmm.
by working through it, figuring it out. Right? There wasn't many complaints that I heard from my parents during my childhood.
Okay.
And so that's how we dealt with things. So fast forward to going to college and being the first in my family to leave home and go off to college. I had no idea what mental health was. I had
Mm.
no idea what mental health conditions were, things like depression, anxiety. I had never heard those things in the confines of it being a mental health condition.
Hmm.
When I
Hmm.
thought of the word depression or anxiety, I thought that's just a white person's issue, or
Wow.
that is for people who aren't strong enough to handle life's pressures.
Oh my goodness.
That doesn't happen to people like me, right? Like, not, tall, dark, handsome gentlemen
That's
like
right.
myself, right? Growing up to strong Jamaican proud parents, right? We don't People like us, we don't get depressed. And so that cultural background is what shaped and developed the way I knew what mental health was for me. And that carried into me dealing with depression as a college student. and not knowing that it was depression, not knowing that there was help accessible to me as a student,
Hmm.
and leading to me suffering in silence.
Wow, wow, wow. So, how did it all start for you? Like, was there an event? Because I suffered with depression and anxiety, and uh, I wasn't sure even what to do. I wasn't even sure if I was in it.
Mhm.
I just thought I was sad. But it came on as a result of trauma, tragedy, and trauma. My mother passed away in my home,
Hmm.
and she had me to plan her funeral. So she told me she was going to die. And she told me that her time wasn't long. And she pressured me every day to do something towards her end of life stuff.
Wow.
So, do my do not resuscitate, pick out the call, literally.
How
Like,
old were you?
I was 45,
Wow.
and she was like, I want to pick out my coffin today. Like, what? Like, who wants to
Wow.
go picking out their coffin? So I'm
Yeah.
going to pick out my coffin. This is the way I want to be dressed. And I'm just not, each day I was just kind of getting darker and darker
Mm.
in this process. And I had a sister that was mentally ill. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia,
Hmm.
and she was institutionalized in Pennsylvania. And it wasn't until I had to tell her that my mom had passed, but we couldn't tell her during the time that mom was sick because she was on suicide watch.
Mm.
The doctors just said, this is not a good time to watch her, to tell her this, because we've been watching her and she's just been going into a deeper depression. So I kind of thought maybe she kind of knew, she kind of sensed something was happening.
Mm.
But, that took place. And so it wasn't until I had to tell her 6 months later that my mom had passed when she called to ask to speak to my mother. Go figure. So
Okay.
now all of this is so much stress. Like, this is super stressful. And I wasn't even sure. I just thought, what, I just can't get out of this funk. What is it? And I realized then, I'm in full blown depression. So what was the moment for you that made you realize that, hey, this is not just sadness? Because I think we get it mixed up with, oh, I'm feeling sad today. What was the moment for you?
So it was a series of events. I can't
Okay.
say that there was one specific thing. And to kind of give you some context, I experienced some difficult things growing up as well.
Hmm.
And as I grew older and became more aware and knowledgeable of what mental health conditions look like, and those symptoms, I was kind of backtracking on my youth and realized that I probably was depressed then. I just had no idea.
Okay.
Another thing that happened during when I was younger, my parents, after being married for over 20 years, divorced, and so
Okay.
that was very difficult on our family, and
Mm.
I never dealt with that during that time. So that was an event in addition to other events that occurred. And that's something that I like to mention as well. It's like, for most individuals, we all experience some sort of trauma,
Yeah.
right? Whether it is firsthand or secondary trauma. And so it's important to become aware of how we're affected by certain events so
Hmm.
that we can address those events and actually deal and heal from those
Yes.
things. Because if we don't, then we suppress it and it later leads to something like depression or,
Yes.
a spiral, a downward spiral. But to specifically speak on the diagnosis that I received in college, so I moved away from home in 2014, and I stepped foot on campus at the University of West Florida in Pensacola, Florida, and I was super excited, Lynette. Like, I had the plan all figured out, right? I
Oh,
knew
wow.
I knew everything. Like, no one could tell me nothing. I was this big boss. No one in my family had left home before. I was the first to do it.
Wow.
I was on this new adventure. I'm a college student and I had the plan. I knew exactly what I was going to study. It was information technology because I knew
Wow.
that's where the bag was. And so
Yep.
I was going for the money, right?
Going for the bag.
Going for the bag. So I was going to study information technology. I was going to graduate in 4 years exactly because that's what
Mhm.
my degree audit said, and it has to be right. I was going to get an amazing job once I
So
graduated
you
and
had the
make,
whole plan.
yeah, the whole plan and
I
make a
love it.
whole
I
lot of
love
money.
it.
I knew how much money I was going to send back home once I had
Oh.
my job, everything. But one thing that I like to share throughout my experience is I had everything planned except for what I would do to deal with different adversities and different challenges.
That's
There's this
good,
quote.
Avery.
Yeah, there was this quote that I really love, and it speaks to my experience. It says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So,
I'm from Philadelphia, and we
yeah,
call that
yeah.
until you get stolen in the face, till they steal your
Uh,
face, and
yeah,
you don't. And I just recently started reading something about being blindsided. So until you get blindsided, which is
exactly.
really weird. You can't. How can you be blind and sight at the same time? But I got something on that. But go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So I got punched in the mouth, not physically, but by
Wow.
life, right?
Mm,
And it was depression. So to give you a little bit of context, I was a full-time student. I was working a full-time job because I had to provide for myself financially. I was involved in all the things on campus because I wanted to have the full college experience.
yep.
I found a church when I moved, so I was involved in my church community. I was doing a lot of things. I was that strong
Like I'm
friend.
getting heavy just listening to that.
I know,
Like
right?
I'm feeling heavy,
So
Abraham,
so
listening
you
to
can
all
just
the
imagine,
things.
right? You can
Yes.
just imagine how an 18, 19-year-old is taking on these
Wow.
responsibilities right after leaving home,
Mm,
right? So now when I think back, it makes sense why everything kind of crashed for me at that time. So
mhm.
that went on for some time until my second semester of college. And during my second semester of college is when I was completely overwhelmed. I was completely burnt out. I was failing classes because I had to work so many hours and because I was doing all the things. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, did I literally move 700
Mm,
miles away from home to work and fail? Right. And
mm,
so it's this moment in your life where you come to this realization where you have to make some adjustments, you have to make some changes, and if you don't, you're going to continue to get the same results and continue to spiral. But that was a critical point for me because I had to look myself in the mirror and say, the reason why you are here is because of everything that you're currently doing.
mhm.
And I'm not the type of person to make excuses. And so my approach to that moment of realization was, well, maybe I just got to work harder, right? Maybe I got
Oh,
to take on more, right?
oh my
And
goodness.
yeah,
So that could have been a voice in your head telling you that you know what? I'm just not doing enough. Because see, for me, you cannot beat me worse than I can beat myself. So I
mm,
have to be cautious about the voices in my head that tell me that I'm not good enough. I need to work harder. I need to please everybody. I have to do those things. So I have to be super cautious of that. But yeah, I mean, that's amazing.
yeah.
Wow.
And hear this. I mean, imagine having those thoughts
Mm,
and looking at the role model. The role model is parents
wow.
who wake up, before we wake up, who go off to work, who come home when we're already sleeping, and they never make an excuse. Who am
Mm,
I? Who am I to make an excuse because I can't handle the pressures that I have in
wow.
college? And so I think in addition to the voice that I'm telling, the voices that are in my head that may sound like me, there's
Hmm.
also what it is that I'm looking at. So we got to be
Oh, that's
mindful.
good.
We got to be mindful of who we're watching and
Oh,
making
that's
sure that
good.
we're not living someone else's life or their expectations because it can literally run us into the ground. And because I wasn't focused on me
Hmm.
and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be, And the gift that God gave me, I was solely focused on
Wow.
everyone else's expectations, and even the high expectations that I had on myself that came from another source,
Mm.
right? I was just continuing to spiral. So that led to me literally burning out, right? And so I remember not being able to get out of bed certain mornings.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I physically didn't have the energy or capacity to get out of bed. I didn't have motivation to go to work. And so I was calling off of work. I was calling off of, class. I wasn't going to classes. And I remember being in my apartment. So another thing is I have my own apartment, which meant now I'm paying rent,
You gotta pay,
which
you
is
gotta work, you gotta
you
work,
gotta
you gotta
work.
pay the
You gotta
bills.
work, right? You gotta be able to afford these ramen noodles, right?
Oh my God.
So I remember being home one weekend and I thought I was doing an amazing job of putting up this facade that everything was great. But I
Mm.
had this best friend of mine who could see right through all of it, right? And she called me. I remember she hit me up that morning, and it was the weekend. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful day outside. But I found myself locked in my bedroom underneath my
Wow.
covers with the blinds closed. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything. And I
Mm.
was even hesitant to pick up the phone because I'm like, I don't even feel like myself. I don't know what to tell her. I don't want to talk to anyone.
Mm.
But I picked up the phone. Long story short, she ended up asking me the right question,
Thank
right?
God.
And she poured into me that day. She listened to, everything that I was sharing with her. She didn't judge me. She created a safe space for me to really open up. And I remember telling her everything that I was dealing with during that time, like how I wasn't sleeping at night because I was having these negative racing thoughts keeping me up. I told her how I wasn't eating. I just didn't have an appetite. I told her how I didn't have motivation. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything.
Mm.
And as I was speaking, she's listening. And then she says, "It sounds like you're depressed." And to me, I'm thinking, nah, there's no way I could be depressed. Because remember, like, what I learned growing up, people like me,
Right.
we don't get depressed. So
We
when
don't
she
get
said,
depressed.
exactly, when she said, "It sounds like you're depressed," what I heard was, "It sounds like you're being weak.
Oh,
It sounds
okay.
like you're making excuses."
Oh, I love this. I love this. Okay, so what she said, you heard something completely different.
Going back to those thoughts, right?
Going back to the thoughts, right? She said, sounds like you're depressed. You heard you're weak. You're weak.
You're making
You're
excuses.
making excuses. Wow. That is so powerful because, you know, the Bible tells us that we have to cast down every thought and every imagination that exalts itself above the knowledge of God. And I, first of all, want to say thank God for your friend because I had one that said, not on my watch.
Mm.
Did you eat today? Did you
Yeah.
shower today? What are you doing right now? Open up these blinds. No, you're going to get in the shower today because it's not going to be on my watch. And I thank God for my friend. We're still buds to now today. But she was like, no, 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 no. Let's go. Let's get up. So I thank God for that. But that's interesting that you said she said one thing and you heard another. And do you think that that is typical of people who are going through depression and when someone speaks to them about something that they will think that, oh, wow, I'm not good enough or I am crazy? Or if you try to talk to them about going to therapy, they'll say, well, I'm not crazy. And so talk about that because I think that's a great point to kind of settle in on is you heard something different.
So I wrote a book called Unlearn the Lies. And the reason
Oh.
the reason I wrote the book is because I realized that I wasn't the only one telling myself lies that kept me suffering in silence. Right. And so it
Okay, wait, you weren't the only one telling yourself lies
wasn't just me.
that kept you suffering in silence. That is a very powerful statement. So it goes back to who's around you, who are you watching, who are you allowing to speak into your life. Oh my God, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, that was just so
Yeah.
good. That was an aha for me, like, whoa, an aha for me. Go ahead, because I can relate to everything that you're saying.
100%. And so many of us do. But the reason why we don't know is because we're not talking about it. And
Mm,
so I took it upon myself to start talking about it. So I embarked on this journey of being a mental health advocate in 2016.
okay.
So I had been speaking and advocating for mental health resources and conversations when I was in college in 2016. And like I said, the reason I was doing it is because once I got the knowledge that depression was an actual mental health condition and
Hmm.
there were things that I could do to get well, I started to have these one-on-one conversations with friends, peers, and colleagues. And in those conversations, I realized I wasn't the only one struggling.
Yes.
We all were struggling. It's just
Yes.
nobody was talking about it. And I said, yo, there's a problem here. Ain't no way
Wow.
all my friends and family members gonna be struggling and I got a voice and God gave me a gift.
Mm,
And so I made it my mission to talk about it. And so in the book, I cover 7 specific lies that
okay.
many of us tell ourselves. I'm not going to go through all of the lies, but for the sake of time, but I'll share with you a few lies that I
Okay.
hear often as I do presentations, as I have conversations. And this can be from someone who is 12, 13, 14 to someone who's in their 60s,
Hmm.
70s, right? The lies are the same,
They
right?
are.
Because they're passed down from generations,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so one of the lies is that mental illness, things like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, is a sign of weakness.
Mm,
And so
yes.
if you are depressed, you are weak. And in uncovering these
Wow.
lies, the only way I was able to reshape my thinking was to find the truth.
Mm,
And so I highlight in the book, what is the lie? What is the truth? How do we unlearn the lie and relearn the truth?
mm,
Right.
that's so
And
good.
so that's one of the lies, that depression is a sign of weakness. Another lie is that I can pray depression away.
Oh,
There's a,
I that's a
yeah, go
good
ahead.
one.
Go ahead.
That's
Go
a
ahead.
good one. That's a good one. Oh my God, that you can pray depression away. Why is that a lie?
So there is a scripture that I found. And for me, I needed this because of my background, because of my identity, because of my
Hmm.
foundation. My foundation and my belief is that I was created by a creator,
Mm,
and this creator loves me, right? And he will do everything in his power to give me whatever instruction I need to live here on this earth, right? And so
mhm,
because that is who I am, I needed evidence to validate that, right? And so I found in the Bible, which is my basic instruction
okay.
manual before leaving this earth, in the book of James, right? And it says, I
Okay.
can't remember exactly where in James, but it says faith without works is dead,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so essentially what that meant for me is that I can have faith that I was going to be well and that I wasn't going to stay in this position
Oh, come
forever.
on, Abraham.
But if I didn't apply the work,
Mm,
I couldn't expect any other result than what I was getting. And so my next question to myself was, so what is the work? How
mm,
do I work for my mental health? I don't even know what mental health is. I never heard of this. I didn't know you
mm.
could work for it. I didn't know you can prioritize it. What does that even mean? Right? And
Oh, I'm
so
working for my mental health today.
yeah, like
Hmm.
what? That don't even sound right. So I had to educate myself again, right? And so a part of the work for me was consistently seeing a psychologist. During the
Mm,
early parts of treatment for me, I was taking medication for
okay.
depression,
Okay.
right? A part of the work was consistently journaling. We're talking
Mm,
about thoughts. I had to learn how to challenge negative thoughts instead of accepting them as the truth, because just because the thought is in my head, it doesn't make the thought true. And
Oh,
oftentimes I was taking these thoughts as truth because I'm thinking, well, if it's in my head, it must be true.
it has to be true, Abraham.
But
Like,
that's not the truth.
because it's true. It's like it has to be true. And that is not true.
And I gave
Oh,
those
that's
thoughts
good.
so much power and they were ruling my
Wow.
life. And so I had to learn how to challenge negative thoughts. And that is work. That's not easy.
It is not. It's
Right.
not easy.
And so I
No.
continued to pray and I
Mhm.
continued to do the work. And then I started to see some positive results. So it makes sense. Albert Einstein says insanity is doing the same thing over and
Over
over,
and over.
yet expecting different results. I
Yeah.
just started to do something different and I started to see the results that I wanted to see.
Exactly. I went to therapy, and I think for the first 6 weeks I cried. I just
Mm,
cried. I cried. I mean, because I had never just talked to people about my raw feelings, like my very raw feelings, and not have them judge me, right? Because
mhm,
we were always being, of course, we're being judged. So we guard ourselves and not want to share our
mhm,
most intimate feelings, or, like you said, feel like we are weak, because shame has been put on us that if you are depressed, you are weak. And I'll never forget, like, my therapist telling me that one of the things that he wanted me to work on was to stop allowing people to rent space in my head.
I like that.
That was
Break that
an
down. Wh-
aha moment. And so he said I was giving away space in my head to people. And he goes, at least if you're going to rent some space, rent means pay. They need to at least pay.
Yeah.
But I was allowing people to get in my headspace, to tell me that I wasn't good enough, to tell me I wasn't worthy. And so it started to bring on low self-esteem. And I just felt like I couldn't do anything great.
Mm,
And so, going through, I wrote a book as well. And one of the basic things that I share with people in this book is to look beyond the surface of what they're going through to identify the things that brought them there. So, in
mm.
essence, people think that a sinkhole just happens, right? And I said this even last week on my show, but we think that a sinkhole is, oh my God, a 40-foot sinkhole just opened up and it's like 40 feet. That sinkhole has been working for years. What you just see is the byproduct of it, which is the hole. But the underlying resources have been deteriorating. That earth has been deteriorating for a long time. And then what happens, it just opens up. And so you see the depression. So what you were experiencing, because I was feeling the heaviness of all of the things that you had to do
Yeah.
in college. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting heavy from just wanting to take that weight from you. But what was going on was resources, your underlying internal resources, besides the stuff that's in your head, was just wearing you out. And interesting enough, I had a house in Riverdale, Georgia. And when that house was built, what the contractors used to do years ago was all of the extra supplies and they shouldn't have done, it's just completely illegal to do. But all of the extra material left from the building of the house, they just dug a hole and just put it there. And so I was in that house for years. And then all of a sudden I started seeing, my backyard get this hole, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'll never forget God bringing that to my remembrance to say, this is how depression looks. But what happened was all of the material, all the stuff that was not solid, that was buried under there, eventually deteriorated. It evaporated. It
Mm,
just went to nothing, which caused the hole. And so that helped me to help other people to say, let's look beyond the surface. Because right now the surface is showing us what's going on, but we've got to look deeper to
mm,
find out what's going on the inside of us that's bringing this hole on the surface. Let's try to fill. The book is called Hollow, by the way.
I like it.
But it's like, let's try to fill the space inside of us so that we don't have these open holes of depression in our life. And so, with that, I tried to fill my life with all the wrong things:
Mm,
drugs, alcohol, people, I'm not good enough, low self.
mhm.
So I tried to fill it with a lot of the wrong things. But it's just something that you are, the mind is just so powerful that you have to be cautious as to who comes into your life, who feeds you, because those thoughts can be just interesting. You had something on your website that talked about your faith in God and depression together. Talk a little bit about that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Matter of fact, I'm
Yeah.
gonna,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can touch on that story, but
Yeah,
before I get there, I
yeah.
do want to reverse just a little bit
Hmm.
because I was thinking about um my remarks about faith without works is dead,
Uh-huh.
right? And I want to come back to that for just a moment because
Sure.
it's critically important that we understand that as just because we're putting in the work, it doesn't mean that we're going to see results right away. It's
Yes.
more of the perspective of I am committing to the process and willing
Hmm.
to do what it takes for me to experience well-being,
Yeah.
right? And I think oftentimes, especially for me early on, I started doing the work and I started expecting results right away because I was doing the work.
Hmm.
But I had some low moments and I had some high moments, and it was a long period of treatment and recovery before I started to see something. And I kind of liken it to the farmer, right? The seasoned farmer, the one who's been doing this for a while, right?
Hmm.
He's not, new to this. But when he goes out and he plants seeds,
Hmm.
right? And he goes to sleep that night, he doesn't stay up worrying about whether or not those seeds are going to bring a harvest
That's
because
good.
he knows that whatever he sows, he will also reap in
That's
due
good.
season. And I think when it comes to our mental health, we need to take the time limit
Oh,
off of
good.
it. We need to take the expectations off of it and just say, this is what it looks like to prioritize my mental health. Just like we show up to work, we don't know. Well, I don't work for anybody, but like when
Ooh,
I
that's
did
nice.
at one point, I don't show up to work every single day wondering and worrying, when am I going to be promoted? When am I going to get that
Okay.
raise? When am I, you know what I'm saying? You
Hmm.
commit to the process and you do what you need to do. And then at some point you will be recognized and compensated for the work that you're doing on a daily basis, consistent basis. So I do
Hmm.
want to tie that into it, is patience and consistency in prioritizing our mental health is what allows us to experience those results. But going back to your point about faith in God. So I remember when I got to a really low point during my life when I was away in college, and it got so bad to where I was having these negative thoughts, and they got really dark. And at the time, I was
Mm.
on medication, and I wasn't having a good reaction to medication. And I remember I started to think about suicide,
Mm.
and it was the first in my life that I had ever imagined anything like that. And I never thought that someone like me, like, the happy person, the strong friend, the motivated person, like, how could I be thinking about something like this? And so I was very afraid, right?
Mm.
And it got so bad to the point where I wasn't sure whether I would act on those thoughts or not.
Wow.
I didn't have the confidence that I wouldn't act on it. And so I packed my bags and I went back home. I didn't
Mm.
tell anyone, right? I just packed my bags and I left, right? Because I was too afraid. And as I was back home and everything that comes with being back home and, not graduating and being in that type of environment, with individuals who don't understand depression, that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But I was back home and I remember taking a walk one morning, and that is something that I still do to this day in working for my mental health and prioritizing my mental health. I call it my walk and talk with God, right? So
That's
no
good.
phones, no music. I just walk in silence, and it's beautiful for me. But I was on that walk that morning, and um, I remember going to this specific park nearby,
Mm-hmm.
And as I was walking, I'm talking to God and I'm asking, God, what's the purpose of all of this? Right. I could have, like, if someone would have told me this is the position I would have been before I got here, I would have said, nah, not me. Right. Like, I'm the
Right.
type of person that goes off to school and graduates in 4 years. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not the person who goes off to school and then has to come back home because he's depressed. Like, so I was really questioning and trying to figure out the purpose in all of this. And I could remember it like it was clear, as day. And I felt like God was telling me, this is your opportunity to speak to inspire.
Mm.
And it didn't mean anything to me at that time.
It
Nothing. I was
didn't.
just like, I was like, well, let me just keep walking.
Wow.
That means nothing, right? I'm depressed. I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know. That means nothing. But long story short, about a year and a half went by, and I started to think, about how I could use my experience and
Mm.
all of what I have been going through to really impact someone's life. Because I'm a big believer that, we go through things and there's
Yes.
always a lesson. There's always an
Yes.
opportunity to help someone else. And I'm sure
Yes.
you're the same way.
Yes.
But I started to look for ways, how do I use this? Because there's no
Mhm.
way something this gigantic happens in my life and I
Yes.
don't do something with it. There's no way that
That
happens.
is beautiful.
Yeah. And so that's when the thought came back to me, speak to inspire. What if I spoke to inspire? Right. And so that quote that you're referring to has everything to do with that conversation that I had that morning. And
Mhm.
the recognition of just that term, speak to inspire. For me,
Mm.
inspire means to influence someone to act, to do
Oh, that's
something,
good.
right? It's not just these words that make you feel good. It's this influence that allows you and empowers you to do something.
Mhm.
And that has been my mission ever since. Which is just inspiring, using my story, using the knowledge and expertise that I
Yeah.
have to create change.
That is so exciting. That was the one voice that I'm grateful that you listened to. Uh, it's kind of like people say, well, well, you hear God and I hear him, in my heart and I hear him in my head. And so I would say if someone says, hey, how do you separate what's a good thought and what's a bad thought, or what's a good thing? Well, if it's going to bring life to you and bring life to others, then it's good. It's from, I would say it's of God. But if it's telling you to go out to do something negative, harm yourself, because it's a suicidal ideation, those thoughts of suicide. And I had those,
Mm,
and I'll never forget. I lived in Florida, I lived in Tampa. And so, in Tampa or down in Florida, a pool comes like normally everybody else may get a washer and dryer with their house, but a pool comes with your house with
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
You got to have a pool in
Expect
Florida,
it.
or why be in Florida?
Yeah.
And I had this really lovely pool that I enjoy swimming in, in the evenings. But I remember being so, because I went dark too, Abraham. I went real dark. And I remember sitting outside thinking to myself, I could just like contemplate it, like strategic. That's those thoughts that we don't need to listen to, but strategic and contemplating. You know what? Life just sucks so bad right now. Things are just so bad for me. I'm just going to just like, I'll just jump in at 6 feet. But I'm going to tie a rock to my ankle so that I
Mm,
could stay down, and I can just, I'll just drown. I'll just drown.
mm,
And the only thing that really helped me with that thought was the thought of my son getting off the school bus at 16 years of age, having to turn the corner, and you would get off the bus, turn the corner, and you would see our pool. And what would happen to him if he walked and saw me there?
mm,
And that stopped. I had another thought, because that very sister that was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, I took her off life support. So she only went in to have knee surgery. And I went to Pennsylvania, went with her. Monday, she had knee surgery. Thursday, I took her off life support.
Wow.
And it was sudden, shocking, just can't believe this. And I never forget, after identifying her body, I had to get on a plane and go home. And just thinking, like,
Mm,
what just happened? Like when I was flying here from Tampa to Pennsylvania, if you had asked me if that was going to happen on Thursday, that I would be identifying her, I would be like, get out of here. But that happened, and that was another time that I had thoughts of, I'm being pumped, like like
mm,
what's going on? And so it was at that point that I started to, know that I needed to get some help, because I was having too many days of darkness. So therefore, I always tell people that, depression is a normal process of life. We get sad. We get sad. We the sun rises and it sets. But if the sun rises and it never it sets, then we have a problem. Or if the sun doesn't ever rise, we have a problem. And
mm.
so that's when I began to identify, because my sun, was never rising again.
That's good.
It was just staying dark. It just was dark. And I said, I gotta get some help. And through friends, I was able to do that. And so let's chat a little bit about how we can help students or people, because I read an article that said 1,100 college students, matter of fact, I have it up, said 1,100 college students, um, so 1,100 suicides on college campuses per year. 1,100
Mm,
approximately. And 25% know of someone who has died as a result of suicide, and 40% know someone who's attempted
mm.
suicide. So let's talk a little bit about how we can shift this story now and really help people who may be not in college, but not necessarily in college, but to kind of work through the process. You talked about things that help you um, practice good mental health. So, share some things that you do so that you don't go dark.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing your story and being transparent on this. I think it's critical that we who have stories share those stories,
Mhm.
because it helps to end the stigma associated with
Yes,
mental health conditions and just the human experience. When
yes,
we can put a face and a name and a voice to
yep.
different conditions, it makes it a little bit easier to talk about it and get help. So thank you for that. I do want to kind of stay in the same vein of what you were talking about with suicide, because it's a very important conversation, especially now with what we're seeing in the news, specifically regarding student athletes.
Mm,
So number one, what I oftentimes share is that when someone is considering suicide, more times than not, they don't want to die.
that's true. I didn't want to die.
They want to end the pain.
I wanted the pain to stop. That's so good.
So, what I
Very good.
share is that suicide does not end the pain, it transfers it to those who are left behind.
Wow, that's huge.
And
Yes.
it's very important that you shared what you shared, because you were considering suicide, but the thought of transferring that pain to
Mm,
your son is what stopped you in your tracks to say, what would this do to my son?
mm,
And I think when we can have that perspective in those low moments, it can increase the likelihood of us wanting to stay alive, because we're not just thinking about, my pain and what this may do to us. And what we know as human beings is that we have an innate desire for human connection. And
yes.
so if we can build human connection, even if it's just in our thoughts,
Yeah.
that alone gives us hope to stay alive. So because you were thinking about your connection with your son, it gave you the hope to say, I'm not going to do that,
Yeah.
because that will do something to my son. So I do want to share that, but also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a very good resource.
Okay.
It's 800 or 1-800-273-8255. And there's also a crisis text line. So any individual watching this or, listening to the replay, if you text the word home, HOME, to 741-741, you can speak with a crisis counselor 24/7, absolutely free.
That's
And
good.
that's if you are in a position where you need to talk to someone, maybe you're not comfortable, speaking, and you want to text, you can utilize either of those resources. But here's the other thing with those resources: you don't have to be considering suicide to tap in,
That's
right?
good. That's
Let's
good.
say, for example, it's 3 a.m. and all of your friends and family members are asleep. You don't want to wake them up. You make the call. Let's say you don't have anyone that
That's
you
good.
that you can trust and that you really can speak to. You make the call. Let's say you are considering suicide and you're very afraid that you might act on it. You make the call, right?
That's
And
good.
so you can tap into these resources. They're absolutely free. And they can help us to prevent suicide because it's one of the most preventable diseases, like,
Yes.
ever, out of all diseases, right? And so I do want to share that point. But as it relates to what the work that we do in colleges and universities and the work that we do with young adults, is we help institutions prioritize mental health. When you
That's
can see
good.
the connection between mental health and well-being and academic achievement, student retention, right, and
Oh,
student engagement,
yes.
you're more likely to prioritize this to then get your outcome or your goal. So
That's
what we
good.
do is we bring education and we develop programs for schools to bring mental health campaigns. So for a school that has no conversations or awareness of mental health or resources, we come in and we provide that resource. We provide that service, right? So that can look like keynote presentations from one of our speakers on our Speaks to Inspire team. It can look like staff development, professional development. It can look like training. We also offer suicide and crisis prevention training as
Hmm.
well. It can look like curriculum. So we design and customize curriculum for schools as well. So we have a variety of different services, but everything gears towards us solving the problem of stigma being on campuses and young adult mental health not being prioritized. So our mission is to eradicate mental health stigma and support the well-being of our young adults. And anything that we can do to
Wow.
make sure that happens, we're willing to do that. I'm trying to think of any tangible, practical things. So I would say the number one thing that we can do for anyone considering suicide or someone who's just in a dark position is listen.
That's good.
Listen to understand, not to
Oh,
not to
good.
say the right things, not to have the perfect
Or
words
respond.
or
Yeah. Listen to
respond.
understand.
Listen to understand. And when we can have the perspective of, I just
That's
want to sit
good.
here with you. I just want to hear, right? You can say things like, tell me more,
Hmm.
right? I don't understand that. I've never been there. Tell me more.
That's so good.
Right. And when my best friend did that for me years ago, I knew she was genuine because she could have easily said, "Oh, Abe, you good? All right, I'll talk to you next time." But
Because
she
we don't
said,
tell people that it's not something that, oh, I'm just not, but if we tell you that we're not doing good, listen.
mhm,
Listen, because
mhm,
one of the things that we do is we hide behind that mask, that screen, because we don't want anybody to know. We There's a song out that says, if I'm being honest, I'm not being honest. I
mm,
give you roses from my garden just so that you don't see the weeds. I give
wow,
you roses just so that you don't see the weeds in my garden. And so we don't come out and say, I'm depressed today. No, a lot of times listening to a person will help you understand the state of where they are. But if a person tells you that they're not doing good, listen,
mhm,
and get help because they're crying out. I tried to express this to a family member, and this is the way I described it. They said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing good." Well, what do you mean you're not doing good? I said, "Okay, let me try to help you understand. My brain is like jello, okay? And if you were to put jello in your hands right now, the heat from your hands would begin to melt the jello.
hmm,
And if you're holding the jello in your hands like that, this is what I'm explaining it to her. So the jello will begin to seep. I said, every day My job is to not let the jello hit the floor. That's all I'm trying to do. Is I just don't want the like if I felt like if the
What an
jello hit the
explanation.
floor, that it just and I tried to, I was just so in such a dark place that I wanted them. I said, but if the jello hit the floor, it's over. And every day I work hard just to cup my hands so that I don't drop the jello on the floor. And so if a person is speaking to you in that term or just talking to you, telling you that they're not doing good, listen,
I
just
love
listen.
I love that visual because I think we all can imagine that as you're explaining it.
Exactly.
And I want to ask you a follow-up question. I hope it's okay before I
Yeah.
share some of the things that I do to make sure that I'm staying well. Um, when you are in those seasons or when you have been in those seasons in the past, what is it that you needed from those who were close to you, those who you love?
I needed someone to hear me. Just listen. Just just listen to me and just let me share what's on my heart because for me, and here's another, I'm a very visual person, as you can tell. I have a company that's called Speak Out Loud. It's a marketing company. We do digital graphics, right? But for me, the way I try to explain it to people is all my files were on top of the cabinet. And I could never have any total recall because I didn't know where anything was. So for me, I needed to get that stuff filed away and put in its proper place in a filing cabinet. So I'm old school. I'm 60. So, okay. So that's why I talk about files. But even if it's digital
Beware.
files, 60, I am 60. Even if it's digital files, it's just like having your computer screen with every file that you have ever saved to your desktop on your desktop and not put away in proper files. That's how my brain was very chaotic. And so I was just reaching out to folks to try to figure out, like I just need some help. And but the reason why I couldn't get the help from those friends and family that because they didn't understand. They didn't understand Abraham because of the stigma attached to it. And so no one wants a broken friend. No one wants a broken family member. And so I've heard this before. I don't know whether you've heard this before, but it's like, how you doing? Oh, I ain't doing that great today. Okay, well, call me when you feel better.
Hmm. Wow.
Call me. All right, girl, well, call me when you feel better. Or call me when, no, I'm telling you, I'm not doing well. So, yes, if for me, I just needed somebody to just help me, Abraham, file the files. Help me make sense of this. And my therapist was able to help me do that because first of all, he was telling me, you trying to do all the things and you trying to be everything to everybody. You're just one person. People are renting space in your head. They don't need to do that. You need to learn boundaries. And you need to say no. And it was difficult for me to do that. So I hope I
Wow.
answered your question.
Absolutely. You and these analogies, these are amazing.
I'm
I need to come
visual.
to you when I need some
We need
speaking
to
tips.
work with each other because I'm super visual and I see things in pictures. I see in pictures
I
and I
can see
see,
it as
yeah,
you're explaining it.
exactly.
Yeah.
I can see in pictures like I'm just trying to get the files back in the cabinet. I'm just trying to
Mhm.
clean up my desktop.
Yeah.
And here's another analogy. What I did was, and I know a lot of people do this because I still do this right now. I multitask a lot on my computers. And just because you're not looking at the software in front of you doesn't mean it's not running in the background.
Hmm.
So you may have Word up, I may have Excel up, I may have PowerPoint up, I may have Final Pro X up. I'm surfing the internet, and because I minimize those things doesn't mean that those things are not still pulling from my CPU. They're pulling energy. They're pulling, my CPU is dragging. And a lot of times we just have to shut some stuff down. We've got to shut some files down. We've got to literally shut it down. And that's been something that I've had to learn to do. It's a learning process, Abraham, but I've had to say, nope, I shut it down. I have to shut it down. I got to unplug, and I got to not just minimize the file, because it's always, and then that causes viruses to come in, because that stuff is running in the background all the time. I didn't learn, I have an iPhone, and I didn't learn that, he's like, my phone always doesn't hold a charge. But then my son said to me, well, you got all these things open. So he started doing this, closing up the files. And I was like, wait a minute, that's going to stop my. Absolutely. So I think just going back to what you talked about earlier, you were doing all the things, you had all the files, all your files were open.
Yeah.
And you were saying, yo, what do I do now? And your CPU wasn't properly working. So that was another one for you. How about that?
So good. So good. Where's my notebook? Well, I got the
Man,
recording, so
you got the
I can
recording.
exactly. This is
Absolutely.
live, so I would definitely be.
We have Annette. She's out here. Annette Cloud. Hi, Annette. How are
Saying
you?
that.
And she says, I definitely understand the files analogy. Absolutely. Annette, I've known Annette for years. And we probably should have checked into a couple places years ago when we were growing up, right, girl? But no, that the files analogy is really, really good. So Abraham, talk to us as we begin to close up and wrap up now. Help us understand just what we can do if a person wants to get connected with your programs, if they want to hire you, because I think your story is absolutely phenomenal. And just listening to you share, and like we didn't even get into the cultural piece, right? So
Mhm.
just listening to you share your story, about your upbringing and things like that, just blessed me. And I've heard your story before, and it's a beautiful testimony, and I just love listening to you articulate, um, how you've grown through this process. And now that out of this pain that you have, you are now, it's leaning you towards your purpose. But like, how does a person get you to come to their church? Because our churches need to hear you. How far do you go? Like, do you go to high schools? Do you go to middle schools? How far do you go?
So we are willing to partner with any institution who's looking to start the conversation. So that looks like churches, high schools, middle schools, corporations. We focus mainly in higher education.
Okay.
However, we have requests from all over. We recently got a request from a tech company in California, and the tech
Wow.
company has nothing to do with who we specifically work with, but mental health is
Mhm.
something we all need to talk about. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. So whoever's willing to have the conversation, we're willing to partner to
Mhm.
amplify the conversation about mental health and resources. I do want to share something to what you mentioned about my story, and thank you for those words. The reason why the story is so powerful, I'm gonna tell you the secret. You
Okay.
ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
The reason why it's so powerful is because it's relatable.
Mm.
You find yourself somewhere in my story.
Absolutely.
The reason why we emphasize storytelling is because it's relatable.
That's
So
right.
so I'm with Speaks to Inspire, the mental health solution for young adults suffering in silence. We're on a mission to eradicate mental health stigma and support the well-being of young adults. And the way we do that is through storytelling
That's
and
good.
mental health education. When we can pair the two,
Mm.
that's when you see real change. Because if
Oh,
you
that's
can
good.
have someone stand in front of you and give you something that you can put yourself into but then provide context and education to what this actually means and how you can get help, transformation happens there. So
Oh, that's good.
they can reach out to us. I see it at the bottom now, speaks2inspire.com. And there's information to learn more about the company, our services, and how you can contact us. There is a contact button at the top or a work with us button at the top, and you can submit a contact form, and our team will reach out to you as soon as possible.
So, how long have you been doing this, my brother?
So I have been doing speaking, public speaking, professional speaking since 2016.
Okay.
In March of 2020 is when I established this agency, Speaks
Okay.
to Inspire. Prior to that, I had been speaking independently, and that was just the speaking aspect. Now we offer a ton of other services as well within the agency.
Well, I am just so excited and I'm super proud of you. You are so amazing.
Thank you.
And, as I mentioned, I heard your story. You blessed me. You motivated me to continue to tell the story. I
I'm sorry to cut you off. You have such a deep, powerful story. Like, I was sitting here thinking to myself, like, that was a lot that you experienced. And I can just imagine the process of being able to uncover some of that stuff and like really
Mhm,
heal from that. And it was just mind blowing to hear you. I think I heard bits and pieces of it before somewhere, but
mhm.
just to hear you kind of break it down today was very powerful. So thank you again
Thank
for doing
you.
that.
No, and really, to be honest, it's a process of a succession of things that took place in a period of 18 months, which I just crashed and burnt after that. It was just,
Mm,
I was just done. I lost a job. I lost a nephew from cirrhosis of the liver at 36 years of
wow.
age, and I was with him. So each person that died in my life, I was with them when they drew their last breath.
Hmm,
So when you see a person flatline, it changes how you see life. So when you see a person die, it changes how you see life. And the interesting thing
hmm.
is when you watch it on TV. Oh, they boop, 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 they just flatline. No, to see that for life, for real, and to know that it is a family member, it was a sibling, and that you were responsible for uh, the do not resuscitate, that you had to put your name on the line that says let's unplug everything. And for years, Abraham, I carried the
Hmm.
voices and the pain and the heaviness of it was your fault that she died. For years, and until I went to therapy and said, listen, that's why I said to you, when I first went to therapy, I probably cried for 6 weeks. Like the doctor's trying to talk to me. I mean, it was just one of those breathe, those ones that cries that you can't breathe that well,
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know that one real well.
It was one of those, and it was just because I had so much on the inside of me, and he really encouraged me to journal. So I journaled through that process, and then after I started getting healing from the journaling, I actually picked up my journal and started writing lessons learned
Wow.
from the things that I learned. I was like, girl, you were really tripping at this time, but you could have done this or you should have done this. And so I formulated this book. As a matter of fact, Annette was at my book signing back in
Nice.
2011. She came from Charlotte. She's a good friend, and she came from Charlotte for that. But it just is a lot to deal with. And you've motivated me. You've inspired me, Abraham Sculley.
I
Matter of
did
fact, I
my
love
job.
your name. You did your job. I love your name, by the way. I love
Thank you.
seeing Abraham Sculley.
Yeah.
But you've inspired me to pull the book out and do a lot more with it, and to really, in this day and time, because I think I was a little bit ahead of my time. I think what I wrote about it, I've spoken in Thailand, I've spoken all over the US when the
Wow.
book came out. And not one person, I don't care if they didn't speak English, they would come to me with a translator and say, that's my story. So that's what you were saying, is you can find yourself in that story. And they were like, this is my life. Were you looking in my room last night? Or
Mhm.
this is what I've been experiencing. And so it's really, really been, it's been a ride, but I really am feeling a pull back in that area to do that. So you have inspired Miss Jackson to get
Sorry,
above.
Miss Jackson.
Okay, I'm gonna let you go ahead with that, because if I got a penny for everybody that sang that song to me,
Well,
I
you set
would
it up.
be
You set it up
I
for me, so I couldn't resist.
I mean, and then of course I get Miss Jackson if you're nasty. I get that one all
Ah,
the
okay,
time.
okay.
Mainly when I'm at the airport and I'm checking in and I'm like, yeah, what's your name? Lynette Jackson. Oh, sorry, Miss Jackson. You're like, oh, okay, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah.
But you have really, really inspired me to really to take up the cause and to really continue to press, because I have a family member that, like I said, my sister, and for years she was misdiagnosed. And so that's a whole nother story. So Abraham, you
Mm.
don't have to come back. And I love to have you come on, speak out loud, and speak out loud about all this good stuff and share some of the stories and some of the deliverance of people. Because I always feel like on the other side of your obedience is someone else's deliverance. And so today, I thank you for agreeing to speak to our audience, because there are so many people today that have been delivered and that will contact you, that will contact the National Suicide Prevention Line, and just to get some help. So before we leave, I would just love for you to just look in the camera and inspire someone today with something that can help them move from darkness into light.
You're not alone, and everything that you are experiencing at this time, you don't have to experience by yourself. So there are resources. Be sure to tap into those resources. Again, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255, or you can text the crisis text line at 741-741, and you'll text the word home. So know that you're not alone. I got your back. Miss Jackson has got your back. And you have people who know and love you and want to see you do well. So reach out if you need help.
Oh, Abraham, thank you so much. Thank you for just coming on and sharing your story. As I mentioned to everyone, I was out on Instagram earlier. I always go live on Instagram to tell them, hey, I was saying this guy is really going to inspire you. So you really, really need to come on over and check us out. So thank you so much. Speaks2inspire.com is the website. And we are talking to the great. Did anybody ever put that name on top of
No.
it? Yeah, well, I'm deeming you now. I'm anointing you the
Anoint me.
great.
You got the oil?
I got the oil, because we got to have some oil. But the great Abraham Sculley, thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. Guys, it's been such a ride, and we normally don't go over an hour, but I just couldn't stop because it's been so good, and Abraham has just really blessed us. So we're going to do this in a two-part. I know when we go on KBCN TV, we're going to use this as a two-parter because this was so good, and the information that we shared today, I think, is going to bless so many people. Just a reminder, we are on KBCN TV on Thursdays at 6 p.m. So last week's show that was live with Miss Marsha Tate will be airing on KBCN TV on this Thursday at 6 p.m. Remember that God loves you, I love you, but most importantly, learn to love yourself. Bye for now.
You've been watching Speak Out Loud, the story behind the brand with your host, Lynette Jackson. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And until next week, don't forget to use your voice to speak out loud.